Bruce Lee was more than just a martial artist. He was a global icon, a man who reshaped cinema, redefined physical fitness, and became a symbol of cultural pride for millions around the world. To this day, his name carries weight, conjuring images of lightning-fast kicks, philosophical insights, and the fire of a man determined to prove that the limits people place on themselves can always be broken. Yet, for all his brilliance, Bruce Lee's life was cut tragically short. On July 20th, 1973, at just 32 years old, he died in Hong Kong under circumstances that shocked the world. A man in peak physical condition, at the height of his fame, was suddenly gone. Fans wept, newspapers speculated, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was foul play. Others insisted it was a curse. Still others claimed he had pushed his body beyond human limits and paid the price. For decades, the cause of Bruce Lee's death has been one of Hollywood's most enduring mysteries. But now, nearly half a century later, researchers and medical experts believe they have finally uncovered the devastating truth. And it's not just surprising. It's heartbreaking. The final day. To understand what happened, we must first revisit Bruce Lee's last day. On July 20th, 1973, Lee was in Hong Kong preparing for the release of what would become his most famous film, Enter the Dragon. He was already a superstar, not just in Asia but around the globe, with the film industry at his feet. That day, he met with producer Raymond Chow and actress Betty Ting Pei to discuss future projects. At some point in the afternoon, Bruce complained of a headache. Ting Pei gave him Equagesic, a common painkiller that combined aspirin and meprobamate, a tranquilizer. Lee lay down to rest. Hours later, when attempts to wake him failed, panic set in. Doctors were called, but it was too late. Bruce Lee was pronounced dead at Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The official cause of death, as reported at the time, was cerebral edema, swelling of the brain. But that explanation only raised more questions. How could a young, supremely healthy man with no history of neurological issues suddenly die from brain swelling? The rumors begin. Almost immediately, rumors exploded. The world couldn't accept that Bruce Lee, strong, disciplined, seemingly invincible, had died from something as ordinary as a painkiller. Some claimed he had been assassinated by the Chinese triads for refusing to bow to their control over the film industry. Others pointed to the alleged Lee family curse, noting that his son Brandon Lee would later die under tragic circumstances while filming The Crow in 1993. Conspiracy theories flourished, with whispers of poisoned food, government plots, and mystical retribution for revealing martial arts secrets to the West. In Hong Kong, tabloids ran wild with speculation. In Hollywood, shock turned to disbelief. Across the world, millions mourned, but few truly believed the official story. Bruce Lee's physical extremes. To understand why the mystery endured, one must consider the man himself. Bruce Lee's approach to training was legendary. He pushed his body in ways few have ever attempted. He blended martial arts with bodybuilding, cardiovascular endurance, and flexibility drills, creating a routine so intense that it bordered on inhuman. He believed the human body was capable of far more than science had proven, and he set out to test that theory on himself. Lee reportedly trained for up to 6 hours a day, alternating between weightlifting, sparring, running, cycling, and experimenting with new techniques. He kept meticulous records, often changing his routines to shock his muscles into growth. He stripped his body fat to almost non-existent levels, maintaining a physique of lean muscle and speed, unlike any other actor of his time. But some doctors have since argued that this extreme approach may have weakened him, pushing the human body to its absolute limit, while appearing superhuman on the outside, may have left him vulnerable in ways invisible to the naked eye. The heatstroke incident. The first major clue to the truth of Lee's death came not from the day he died, but from an incident 2 months earlier. In May 1973, while working in Hong Kong's brutal summer heat, Lee collapsed. He experienced dizziness, disorientation, and near unconsciousness. Doctors at the time diagnosed it as heat stroke. His body, lean and stripped of almost all fat and water, may have been unable to regulate temperature properly. He recovered, but the incident worried those closest to him. Bruce himself brushed it off, returning to training and filming almost immediately. Looking back, many experts believe this episode was a warning sign, one that went unheeded. The water balance theory. In recent years, medical researchers revisited Bruce Lee's case with modern knowledge of physiology. In 2022, a groundbreaking study proposed a new explanation. Bruce Lee may have died from hyponatremia, a condition caused by dangerously low levels of sodium in the blood. Put simply, the body needs a careful balance of water and electrolytes to function. Too much water without enough sodium can cause cells to swell, including brain cells, leading to cerebral edema. Why would this apply to Bruce Lee? Accounts from those around him suggest that he was drinking large amounts of water that day. Combined with his extremely low body fat and the heat of Hong Kong summer, his kidneys may have struggled to excrete the excess water efficiently. The result? Water intoxication. This theory aligns with the official finding of brain swelling, but provides a mechanism that makes sense. An imbalance triggered by overhydration compounded by his unique physiology and training habits. The devastation of the truth. If true, the cause of Bruce Lee's death is even more devastating than any conspiracy theory. He wasn't assassinated. He wasn't cursed. He didn't die in a duel or from a hidden disease. He died because his body, the very instrument he had perfected, the vessel he had pushed beyond normal human limits, was fragile in ways he never imagined. For a man whose philosophy was about balance, about harmony between body and mind, the irony is tragic. He may have unknowingly unbalanced himself, creating conditions where something as simple as water became deadly. It's a reminder that even the strongest among us are not immune to the subtleties of biology, that the body, no matter how trained, still obeys laws beyond our control. Why? The mystery endured. For decades after Bruce Lee's sudden death, fans clung to theories that placed his passing in the realm of the extraordinary. They could not accept an explanation that sounded too mundane, too ordinary for a man who had seemed almost invincible. A painkiller? Heat stroke? Drinking too much water? To many, these explanations felt unworthy of the dragon. How could the world's greatest martial artist, a man whose body was the epitome of strength, control, and precision, be undone by something so simple? It seemed impossible, even insulting. And yet, perhaps that is exactly what gives the truth its power. Bruce Lee's death was not the result of dark conspiracies or mystical curses, but of something profoundly human. The very ordinariness of the cause strips away the myth and reveals the man behind the legend. For all his greatness, Bruce Lee was not untouchable. He lived, struggled, triumphed, and in the end, succumbed to the same fragile biology that binds every human being. This realization does not diminish him. If anything, it makes his accomplishments even more remarkable. Bruce Lee was extraordinary, not because he was superhuman, but because he pushed the boundaries of what a human being could achieve. His brilliance came from relentless discipline, constant innovation, and an unshakable drive to rise above limitations. He refused to accept the walls society or science tried to place around him. In doing so, he redefined martial arts, reshaped cinema, and inspired millions. But that same drive carried risks. Lee demanded so much of himself that his body was always at the edge of its limits. He trained harder, cut leaner, and pushed further than almost anyone else alive. His life was a constant test of human endurance, and while it elevated him to greatness, it may also have left him vulnerable in ways that no one, not even he, could have predicted. The irony is devastating. The man who taught the world to be water may have been undone by water itself. Yet even in that tragic ending, his story remains one of triumph, because Bruce Lee's legacy is not defined by how he died, but by how he lived. With relentless passion, fearless innovation, and a vision that continues to inspire the world half a century later. Family and legacy. The tragedy of Bruce Lee's death didn't end in 1973. 20 years later, his son Brandon Lee died in a freak accident on a movie set, shot by a prop gun loaded with a faulty blank. The parallels were haunting. Two Lees, both at the height of promising careers, both gone far too soon. The so-called Lee family curse gained traction, feeding the mythology around Bruce's death. But for those closest to him, the reality was far more painful. His wife Linda and his children didn't need conspiracies. They had lost a husband, a father, a brother. They lived with the daily reality of absence, the knowledge that Bruce's genius had been silenced forever. The real cause of Bruce Lee's death may not be a grand conspiracy or a mystical curse, but it is no less devastating. If the latest medical theories are correct, he died not from betrayal or violence, but from the very thing he spent his life mastering, his body. The dragon, who had seemed unstoppable, was undone by biology's smallest imbalance. And yet, even in death, Bruce Lee's legacy lives on. His teachings, his films, his philosophy, they continue to inspire millions. The truth of his death does not diminish his greatness. If anything, it magnifies it, reminding us that legends are human too, and that their fragility makes their brilliance all the more remarkable. The announcement of Bruce Lee's death on July 20th, 1973 was not just a news story. It was a global shockwave. Radio broadcasts, newspaper headlines, and word of mouth carried the devastating truth across continents. In Hong Kong, thousands poured into the streets in disbelief, mourning a hero they considered their own. In the United States, young fans who had only just discovered him through Fists of Fury and The Way of the Dragon struggled to reconcile the death of a man who had seemed immortal on screen. It wasn't simply that Bruce Lee had died, it was that he had died so young, so suddenly, and under circumstances that felt inexplicable. When the autopsy report pointed to cerebral edema, the explanation was technically correct, but emotionally unsatisfying. Cerebral edema was a symptom, not a cause. Why had his brain swelled? Why had his body failed? The lack of clear answers created fertile ground for myths and conspiracy theories, some of which endure to this day. The philosophy of water. Perhaps the most haunting element of Bruce Lee's death is the connection between the proposed cause, water imbalance, and his most famous philosophy, be water, my friend. Bruce Lee often spoke of water as the ultimate metaphor for resilience. Water, he said, can crash or it can flow. It adapts to any container, soft yet unstoppable, carving valleys through stone over centuries. For Lee, water symbolized the perfect state of being, adaptable, fluid, invincible. Yet according to modern research, it may have been water itself, or more specifically, his body's inability to regulate it, that ended his life. Hyponatremia, the dilution of sodium in the blood due to excessive water intake, fits the facts. On that humid July day in Hong Kong, after hours of drinking water to combat the heat, Bruce Lee may have unintentionally triggered a fatal imbalance. The irony is almost unbearable. The man who made water his guiding philosophy was, in the end, undone by it. Why the theories persisted. The truth, however, was slow to emerge. For decades, people clung to alternative explanations, and perhaps understandably so. First, there was the assassination theory. In Hong Kong, organized crime syndicates known as the Triads held significant influence over the entertainment industry. Some believed Bruce Lee had resisted their attempts to control him, making him a target. Stories spread of a poisoned meal or a covert injection, but no evidence ever supported this, and those closest to him rejected it outright. Then came the curse theory. Chinese superstition runs deep, and the Lee family tragedies seem to fit a narrative of generational misfortune. Bruce's father, Lee Hoi Chuen, had also been plagued by illness. Bruce himself died at 32, and his son Brandon at 28. To some, the pattern was undeniable, a curse. But curses are stories we tell ourselves to make sense of senseless loss. They provide meaning, even when none exists. Finally, there was the exhaustion theory. Some suggested that Bruce simply pushed himself too far. His relentless training, near zero body fat, and punishing film schedule left him vulnerable. This theory had some truth. His body was indeed under immense strain. But it didn't explain the precise mechanism of death. In the absence of definitive science, these theories filled the void. Fans needed explanations that matched the magnitude of the man. An ordinary cause felt too small for an extraordinary life. The medical evidence. But medicine has a way of catching up with mystery. Decades after Bruce Lee's death, researchers revisited his case with fresh eyes. In 2022, a team of kidney specialists proposed the hyponatremia theory, pointing to factors that made Lee uniquely vulnerable. First, his low body fat. Bruce had stripped himself to the absolute minimum, reducing the body's natural water reservoirs. Second, his kidney function may have been compromised by previous injuries, painkillers, or even genetic predispositions. Third, his environment. The sweltering humidity of Hong Kong, combined with his relentless physical output, meant he was constantly hydrating. And finally, the timing. On the day of his death, he had reportedly consumed large amounts of water before collapsing. Together, these factors paint a tragic but coherent picture. His body, the very thing he had perfected, could not excrete water fast enough. The excess diluted his sodium levels, his brain cells swelled, and within hours, the greatest martial artist of his generation was gone. Devastation for his family. For Linda Lee, Bruce's wife, the shock was unimaginable. One moment, she was the partner of a man about to conquer the world. The next, she was a widow, left to raise their children alone. In her memoir, she described the surreal blur of those days, the phone call, the disbelief, the funeral preparations. His son Brandon was just 8 years old at the time, too young to fully understand, yet old enough to feel the absence. Years later, when Brandon himself was killed in a freak accident on set, Linda was forced to bury not just her husband but her son, reliving the nightmare all over again. For Bruce's parents and siblings, the grief was equally crushing. They had watched him rise from a child actor in Hong Kong to a global icon. To lose him so suddenly was a wound that never healed. The funeral and legacy. Bruce Lee's funeral drew tens of thousands. In Hong Kong, mourners lined the streets, some fainting from heat and grief, as his casket passed. In Seattle, where he was buried, fellow actors, martial artists, and friends gathered to honor him. The pallbearers included Steve McQueen, James Coburn, and Chuck Norris, a testament to his impact not just on martial arts but on Hollywood itself. But even in death, Bruce Lee's legend only grew. Enter the Dragon, released just days after his passing, cemented him as an international superstar. His image, shirtless, muscles taut, eyes blazing with determination, became immortal. The question surrounding his death became part of the myth. Was he too strong for this world? Was he punished for revealing secrets? Was it destiny? These questions kept his name alive in ways few stars could achieve. Science versus myth. The final irony of Bruce Lee's death is how science and myth clashed in the public imagination. On one hand, the medical explanation is straightforward, logical, and backed by evidence. On the other, the myths are colorful, emotional, and satisfying in their own way. For fans who grew up idolizing him, the idea that he died from something as simple as drinking too much water felt unacceptable. It reduced the dragon to something fragile, ordinary. And yet, in that ordinariness lies a profound truth. Bruce Lee was human. His greatness wasn't in being superhuman, but in showing what a human being could achieve with relentless drive, discipline, and vision. Perhaps the real tragedy isn't that he died from something so mundane, but that we spent decades unable to accept that reality. The cultural impact of his death, Bruce Lee's passing in 1973, didn't just mark the loss of a man. It marked a shift in culture. In Asia, he was a symbol of strength, pride, and defiance at a time when many Asian communities struggled against colonial legacies and racism. In the West, he broke stereotypes, showing audiences that Asian actors could be heroes, not just villains or sidekicks. His films ignited the martial arts craze of the 1970s, inspiring generations to take up karate, kung fu, and taekwondo. His death, therefore, wasn't just personal. It was cultural. It left a vacuum in cinema and in society. People weren't just mourning Bruce Lee. They were mourning what he represented. The idea that barriers could be broken, that East and West could be bridged, that strength could be graceful, and intelligence could be physical. The shadow of Brandon Lee. No discussion of Bruce Lee's death is complete without acknowledging the shadow it cast on his son, Brandon. Born in 1965, Brandon grew up in the glow, in the burden of his father's legacy. As he pursued acting, comparisons were inevitable. In 1993, Brandon was filming The Crow, a dark comic book adaptation. During a scene involving a prop gun, a tragic oversight led to his being shot with a live round lodged in the barrel. He died at 28, eerily echoing his father's premature death 2 decades earlier. The parallel fueled the curse narrative, cementing the Lee family as a tragic dynasty. 2 promising lives extinguished young, both in the prime of their careers. For fans, it was almost too much to bear. For Linda Lee, it was devastation beyond words. Why the truth matters. So why does the real cause of Bruce Lee's death matter? Why does it matter that nearly 50 years later, science points to water intoxication instead of curses or conspiracies? Because truth matters. Myths can inspire, but truth teaches. By understanding the real vulnerabilities that even a man like Bruce Lee faced, we learn humility. We learn that the body, no matter how disciplined, is fragile. We learn that balance, the very thing Bruce preached, isn't just philosophical, but physiological. And in a strange way, the truth deepens his legacy. Bruce Lee wasn't an immortal warrior struck down by mystical forces. He was a man who achieved greatness despite being human, despite the limits that bind us all. That makes his accomplishments even more extraordinary. The enduring inspiration today, Bruce Lee's legacy is everywhere. His films continue to attract new fans. His writings on martial arts and philosophy are studied by athletes, scholars, and entrepreneurs. His image appears on murals, clothing, and even in video games. Modern martial artists credit him as their inspiration. Actors from Jackie Chan to Keanu Reeves have acknowledged his influence. And philosophers note that his teachings on adaptability, balance, and self-expression remain as relevant today as ever. The manner of his death may finally be understood, but the impact of his life is immeasurable. The devastating truth is this: Bruce Lee did not die from an assassin's hand or a family curse. He died from the simple yet deadly imbalance of water in his body. It was ordinary biology that ended the life of an extraordinary man. But perhaps that is where the real lesson lies. Legends are not untouchable. They are human, just like us. And it is precisely their humanity that makes their achievements so inspiring. Bruce Lee taught us to be like water, to adapt, to endure, to flow. In life, he embodied that philosophy. In death, he was betrayed by it. Yet his spirit, his vision, and his influence remain unbroken. Half a century later, the dragon still roars. Bruce Lee's death has finally been explained, not by curses or conspiracies, but by science. And yet, the truth only makes his story more devastating. The dragon who embodied strength, balance, and philosophy was undone by the very body he had trained to perfection. It is a reminder that even the greatest legends are still human, and that their brilliance is measured not by how long they lived, but by how deeply they changed the world. But what do you think? Was Bruce Lee's death simply a tragic accident of biology, or does the mystery run deeper than science can ever explain? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters in keeping his legacy alive. And if you want more stories, don't forget to like, share, and hit that subscribe button, where we reveal the truth behind the legend.